Hello and welcome to the ID Talk podcast. My name is Tony Bitzionis, and I am here, as always, with my co-host, my good friend, Mr. Alex Perala. Alex, hello.
Hello, Tony.
We have a exciting talk today. We're looking forward to it. We have been touching on this subject for a year. It's kind of developing as we're kind of watching it develop as the industry grows. But we have Geoff Mattson, Chief Executive Officer of SecureAuth here today. Jeff, welcome to the show. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us. To get us started, why don't you just give our audience a little intro to yourself and your background and SecureAuth.
Thank you, Tony. SecureAuth is a company that has provided um, best-in-class identity security solutions to some of the largest companies in the world over the past 20 years. And in many respects, it's flying under the radar. Many people have not even heard about them, but it provides very, very strong security solutions in the identity space for primarily aimed at, financial services, defense, healthcare, and large retail, where identity is critical. You might say, why is it critical for retail? Because the access that retail has through e-commerce is, the lifeblood of retail companies as well, right? So, I am the Chief Executive Officer of SecureAuth, and my background is in cybersecurity. I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I've come to SecureAuth because of its rapid growth. It's growing like a hot startup, more than a 20-year-old company at this point. And I'm
Right.
here to usher in that growth and embrace it.
Yeah, Tony mentioned at the top that we're going to be covering a topic that's sort of like increasingly on our radar, which is agentic security primarily. But I don't know where, maybe just to start, we should sort of outline what the problem is for people, because I think there are still quite a few people who don't really even know what is meant by agents and like why should we be worried about this as a security issue. So maybe you can give like a rundown of the issue for the average like business professional who might not be following AI as closely as the rest of us.
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing is everyone's aware of the foundational model companies, such as Anthropic and OpenAI. And the traditional interface to those systems has been through chat, where you ask questions and you receive answers. And the agentic impetus is to harness the intelligence of those agents to do actual work, to do more than talking about things, to actually, for instance, adopt enterprise workflows. And you can, have some of your job outsourced to this agent. Um, and what we're seeing is this has really picked up. This is something people talked about last year. People said that 2025 was going to be the year of the agent, and we see it as the year of talking about the agent.
Mhm.
But when 2026 came around, we saw this huge increase in interest as a result of really two things. One is the models have really gotten very powerful and are much more capable of performing, enterprise level work. And the other is there have been some high profile agents such as OpenClaw really capture the imagination of people with its by sort of taking the guardrails off and making, relatively unsafe agent that you could use with a, buyer beware. It was able to show how powerful these agents can actually be. So now we're seeing this explosive interest in it. And it's coming actually in the enterprise we work with, it's coming from two places. There is a corporate blessed initiative to try to improve efficiencies with agentic workflows. And it really actually makes sense if you think about it. We've been in a world where we have these SaaS vendors provide solutions that are very siloed, and the human is the interface between the multiple SaaS engines. The human is a very slow, um, uh, interface, and it's the work that you do actually in many cases, trying to work between these multiple systems is quite tedious.
Mhm.
So if that's something that we can automate, that can free people up to do much more creative work and, improve, corporate balance sheets and profit and everything as well. So there's that on the one hand. On the other hand, there's the bottoms up push, which is people just find these agents incredibly useful for doing their work for them and
Mhm.
also delightful. I mean, you can give an agent a task and it can go and perform it, and you come back and it's done better than you would have imagined. And this is a big problem for security people I've seen because they are in the position of being, doctor no to both of these parties. They have the board telling them we need to roll out these agentic workflows, and they're saying, well, look, this technology is currently has a lot of safety issues that we need to address. But on the other hand, you have users, and some of which are quite powerful within their organizations that are just going forward and developing this anyway. And I'll give you, one example of this is, a large financial customer had a data breach as a result of a C-suite member doing vibe coding, right? So, and then the problem with this is it's a delightful experience to vibe code if you're an executive and you may not have coded in, decades or ever. And then you're suddenly able to do this, but they're getting these consent screens that say, can we access GitHub? And they're like, what is GitHub? And just yes, 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 yes. Let me get through this. And as a result of that, they, some people say that vibe coding, you may end up with code that's not really, production quality. But what can be worse is if it's agentic, then you can access, data and alter data that may be high priority or sensitive for your organization. So basically, we find these a lot of CISOs, they're in this, and a lot of security organizations in general, they're in this squeeze where they're having both bottoms up and top down pressure to deploy agents, and agents are so delightful and so powerful that they're racing forward in their development, and many times, people really aren't thinking that much about how to secure them, right? We were just at a conference this week for agentic AI, and there's incredibly interesting talks about all kinds of things and this amazing enthusiasm, but uh, nobody's really addressing that security issue, right? So, we think that we love agentic workflows. We've employed them across the board. We work with our companies. We work with some of the largest financial organizations in the world are moving more quickly with this, I've seen, than startups in terms of, adopting agentic workflows. And we want to make it safe. And we want to do it in such a way that you don't even have to think about it. You can deploy agents and you're protected. So, that is our mission right now. And we're, working with, as I said, some of the largest financial, retail, and healthcare companies in the world to roll that out. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm really glad that you brought up the idea that agents can be delightful because I had a roughly 2 month experiment with OpenClaw, and it was just cool. Like it was
Yeah.
fun. It was fun to use. I mean, granted, I spent half my day debugging it, but when you get the first like Telegram message from your agent, it's like, oh, like this is amazing. But at the same time, eventually, when I was like, if someone else had this Telegram and told you to like access these files, how would you know it wasn't me? And it's like, I wouldn't. So,
Yeah. And yeah, to that, and the creator of OpenClaw, he said, of course he loves his own product, and he says, I really wish I could just sort of for every task, I could give some constraints. Like I wish I could give a budget to OpenClaw for something I need. Don't spend more than $100 on this, and then it could actually pay for it. And that's precisely the type of control that we provide. You can take OpenClaw, you can say for X or Y transaction, don't let it exceed $100, for instance, in value, and we will be able to enforce that in real time and make sure that it doesn't break out of the jail. So basically this is something that great visionary builders like him, they are focused on, the functionality and as you said, the delight. And a lot of them haven't really focused on the security aspects of it, particularly not the identity security aspects of it. And so we think that that's sort of a missing link, and we're trying to provide that. We also think that this is a great opportunity because, in the past, in security, identity is what my kid would call NPC, not playing character.
Mhm.
It's whereas now with agentic, it has main character energy. Easy, right? It is a front and center, and the reason for that is because there's all kinds of things we can do to ensure the safety of applications, traditional software applications. You can test them, you can find vulnerabilities, you can patch the vulnerabilities. But with agents, the whole architecture of an agent is to mix data with instructions, right?
Mhm.
And that is exactly how hackers hack into traditional applications, right? They
Mhm.
use
Yeah.
instructions, they use data to, try to jump into the instruction area of code, right? And
Mhm.
so, so basically, they're inherently designed to not be super safe. And the attack surface for them is, for SQL injection, it's SQL and it's the parameters that that you're filtering for and queries. For LLMs, it's the entire set of languages that they understand, right? Is the attack surface. So it's very, very difficult to prevent, to really make sure that prompt injections won't work, for instance.
Mhm.
Um, and and then on top of that, as I said, we have this mixed model where but right now their identity is really broken down into two different types of identities at a very, very high level. Some people are going to, shoot me for making
Mhm.
oversimplifying in a sense, but I need to do that for the purpose of this discussion. And you basically have humans and you have, you know, non-human entities, which are service accounts traditionally, right? So they're just, we all know what humans are, and service accounts are just accounts that are shared. They're not dedicated to one particular human, and they often, automate a lot of tasks, or they run in the background in providing software services. So these are very, very different animals. The human is relatively unpredictable, especially since their accounts can be taken over. And however, humans are relatively, compared to service accounts, are relatively slow and meandering. With service accounts are relatively predictable because they, generally have a dedicated function, and we can watch them accomplish that function. But they're very, very fast and powerful, right? They can access a lot of data and a lot of things very simply. Now, these agentic workflows, they're sort of the best and the worst of both of these, right? They are as unpredictable as a human, but they are as powerful as a service account. And so they create security concerns that we haven't actually seen before. So, for instance, one very significant use case is an agent was acting on behalf of a user and was pulling together data to see which women were, on leave. What the agent was doing was trying to determine which women in the company were pregnant,
Mhm.
when the pregnancy has occurred, which is not something that you want to, it was an HR violation to kind of
Mhm.
pull that information. Now, you wouldn't have to prevent the human from doing this because they wouldn't be able to operate as quickly, right? So they just inherent human speed of access is in itself a control. And a service account would never think about doing anything like this. Nobody would program service account, but an agent can start doing these things. So we really have to start, applying much more thoughtful controls over what they do. But as I said, what we want to do is let them run wild. They're delightful. They increase productivity. But you need to put guardrails not inside them but around them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I mean, it's really for me. refreshing to just hear it broken down so directly and so plainly because, like we've said on the show, it's like specifically agentic AI is something that we have personally talked about as it's developed and shown up on the scene. Um, Alex explained it to me a year ago. I didn't really understand it. And like you said, they said 2025 was going to be the year of the agent. And I think for many people, I don't want to say for the average person, but certainly people who aren't in this industry or who are not kind of following the way that the identity industry is changing, when they think or they hear that AI is playing a bigger role, they might think that you're using a chat interface, and they're not quite appreciating what agentic means or what agents can do. And I think that there's probably, I mean, I guess you would know. Do you think that 2026 is the year that people will fully appreciate this like immediacy of this problem of letting them run wild? Because I saw just this morning somebody was post on social media uh, pointing out that someone had been vibe coding, and I forget what the application was, but there was a screenshot with multiple warnings that they were about to expose all their API keys, and they just did it anyways because they didn't know what they were doing. And I imagine that this is happening a lot. And I think, people using agents wrong in the wrong manner or not kind of having those guardrails up is something that is either going to reach like a really dangerous point or, people like yourself and SecureAuth are going to be able to get across like, no, no, no. Like we really need to be mindful. Like, do you think that that's happening now or is it still going to take
Yeah,
time?
that's a great question. What I've seen is, two types of enterprises. Ones that realize that they have this problem and ones that don't, but do have
Mm,
the problem, right? And generally the reaction that we get when we talk about this with our existing customers or with new customers is one of two. One is like, well, this seems to be a problem, but I'm holding back agentic use in our enterprise. And I have big vendor X, who's my primary IT vendor. You can imagine, who those names are. And they have this trust me, bro, strategy where they're going to take care of it. And all I need to do is kind of, forestall the deployment and the adoption of agentic workflows until they actually come up with a solution. The other ones are give me the solution now, today. You're not leaving the office without, we're seeing a lot more of that second reaction right
mm,
now. And they're asking for features more quickly than we can deliver them. So it just basically it got very real very recently. And as I
mhm,
said, OpenClaw put agents on the map in terms of, the public understanding, at least semi-technical people's understanding. And the power of these models, you see this Glasswing project and how Anthropic is touting how powerful and dangerous its model could be. A lot of people on security X or security Twitter say, well, that's a little bit overhyping, but I know people who are in companies that, Anthropic has tried this model on looking for vulnerabilities and they say, no, this is real, right?
mm.
So basically, you're bringing this super hacker level intelligence into your organization and it will, it's a deviously brilliant and it will find ways around your controls and do things that you never expected, right? And as I said, it's going to be very difficult for CISOs and security people to stop the bottoms up usage of these things and also to resist the board level, pressure to deploy them at a corporate level.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of, in like a way, the same issue that we've talked about with regards to quantum computing and like the coming threat, how it's not something that you might think you need to deal with at this moment, and you don't know exactly when it'll be something that you absolutely must address, but it's going to be an issue for you eventually. So with agentic, it seems like is there a scenario where some company somewhere is like, that's never going to be a problem for us. Like we
I
won't have
think
to worry.
I've never heard it's never going to be a problem. Agentic is in your face right now,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and they said, all I've heard is, well. like I said, this one CISO said, my C-suite is vibe coding, and I need to control that. And everyone's board is telling them they need to roll out agentic solutions. So it's here and now. Quantum is a looming threat at some point. But this is it. This is a threat that it's something that people talked about it as hit last year, but it's really got turned into a real issue in the past quarter, I'd say even, right? So we're
Yeah.
seeing this sea change in terms of what people are doing with agents and the response that people are expecting from the security teams to support them rather than blocking them, right? Easiest thing to do is just say, you can't run this, but you can't even stop people from running it from a shadow perspective, right? It's very, very difficult to do that. You just have to get on board and start embracing it. So what we do is our system will discover those shadow instances and discover the registered instances of agents that are in use. And we start with if you look at our website, we actually, publish a registry that shows what the inherent trust level is of every agent. So we classify them basically in terms of uh, every popular agent. There are, over 50 of them that we're classifying now. You have to look at their internal security controls, so you see what their security posture is, and then you need to see how much of your enterprise resources they access, and the sum of those two dimensions, determines on how dangerous they can be. So if they're only operating on, a little bit of internal data or something, but their security controls internally are light. It's much less dangerous than if they have moderate security, but they're pulling from all of your enterprise systems of record. So yeah, so what we're seeing is uh, agents of various trust levels being deployed, and when they're deployed, that trust level that we assign all agents, we call that the genetic trust level of the agent. Then when it's deployed in your enterprise, we look at what we call the epigenetic trust level, which is, depending on what you allow it to connect to and where in your organization it's connected to, what it can access, and how it develops over time, how people use it. That behavioral profile is its epigenetic profile. And so what we do is discover all the agents. We have a gateway that sits between the agent and anything in your enterprise it can access. It's lightweight, it's zero latency, and it uses to get really nerdy, it uses uh, we use a kind of authentication protocol, OAuth 2.0 with some extensions to check every transaction in real time and make sure that it is within policy. And it will also report every transaction to a central uh, tamper-proof log that can be used for regulatory purposes, for investigate for incident response, and also it's used for analytics. And what our analytics do is we're looking at the behavior of the combination of the user and agent. And we look at the individual behavior of that agent. So we see if it, drifts and if it's acting like it may have been compromised or maybe doing things that it shouldn't. But we use a form of AI to map the behavior of that agent to other similar agents. So we see if it starts to stray from that group, that's an indicator. And then what we're able to do is step up or step down controls as a result of that. Because we're an identity vendor, we can either use authorization to restrict what the agent can do, and you can restrict it all the way down to essentially quarantining it so it's safe. You could actually do this manually too in real time if you need to. Or we can also, ask it to prove itself or attest, prove that it has the right to do certain things, right? So this is a comprehensive way to deal with security. And the main thrust of what we've been doing uh, for our agentic product is trying to make identity less esoteric and more accessible, because we do have, as I said, these vibe coding people, and I think it's wonderful to democratize technology in this way. Identity is extremely esoteric, and many people in security, aren't great experts in it. So we made the ability to put controls in place and to monitor agents much more intuitive and accessible. And we think, most people can understand this in 5 or 10 minutes of training.
Hmm. Yeah, it sounds like earlier I was going to ask if you're sort of tr like, is the solution to treat an agent like a human employee with certain access, but it sounds like this is much more comprehensive. It's not, I mean, you're not monitoring, ideally, you're not monitoring your employees to see who's like drifting away from how they normally behave or whatever. Although I do that with Tony.
Yeah.
I noticed something was off this morning and we're going to talk about it
Well,
later. But
yeah, I
I don't know
mean,
what you're
basically what we're
talking
doing
about.
is we try to associate an agent with a user, and a lot of the companies we work with, they have a policy for doing that. They want someone responsible for the agent at the end of the day, but you just cannot let the agent have the privileges of a user, because as I said, they're super powerful, they're super intelligent in certain ways. They can be super devious, and you need to downscope and to modify, what they can do. Or, as I said, like a user could do one financial transaction every 10 minutes or so. An agent can do one transaction, can do 1,000 transactions in a few seconds, right?
mm,
So you have to really think about it differently from the privileges that you give to a user. The other thing you need too is, like I said, that we don't think there's any new identity problem that is created by these agents, but we think that it exposes existing, holes in many people's in tech debt and many people's identity architecture that's existed for a long time.
mhm,
And you could, in other use cases, you could get away with, having some holes in your identity architecture if you had other mitigations in place, other, detection and response, or uh, other means. But that just doesn't work as well for agentic use cases. You really do need a very strong set of real-time authentication, which is, proving who you are, and authorization, which is proving, which is controlling what you're actually doing. And then you need some sort of understanding of intent as well.
Mhm.
What is this agent really up to? What are they trying to accomplish? Should they be trying to accomplish this?
mhm. Yeah, and I like what you said earlier also about drift, just because that is where so many problems can come from, and it's something that really has not yet been solved by the major AI labs. And like just speaks to your point of you really have to just like you can't trust them. You have to cut them off because even if they're in theory following all the instructions they're supposed to, there still might be drift. And like I found this personally, we use AI to go through a lot of data for some of the stuff we report. And I'll be like, look through all this data, find this information, and then check in later. And it's like, why are you now doing this completely different thing? And it's like, oh, I finished that and then I decided to go into this other folder. And I'm like, no,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's why you really need a strong Bayesian approach to this, right? You have to, with Bayesian in analytics, you start out with assumptions about something. So as I said, we start with this profile of the, a particular agent with its trust level. And then you need to modify your priors and create a new set of assumptions about an agent based on how it behaves, and then see if it, continue to see if it migrates from that. And that needs to be done with agents. They evolve very quickly, and so it needs to be done constantly, right, in real time. The good thing is, like for in the identity space, this type of real-time analytics, as opposed to other areas of security, for some areas of security, you have seconds or minutes or hours before you can, complete your analytic job and make a decision about something. If you're doing forensic investigation or if you're responding to an incident, or if you're even doing detection in real time, you have a little bit of time to do it. But in the identity space, people are trying to access something, people are trying to log in. We need to make a very, very quick decision about whether to, make them go through more rigorous MFA, for instance, or make them reset their password, or just let them go right through, right?
Mhm.
So doing this type of real-time analytics and making fast decisions as a result of it is something that we've built for a long time over many years and deployed in large corporations. So it's and we can use that as a foundation for that, and it's really helpful. No, I'd like to thank you, Alex, for the opportunity to talk about this. And if any of your listeners, would like a way to, control their agentic deployments, simply they can reach out to us, or they can do their own diligence and look at some other solutions. But I just want to get the word out that, there are ways now to deploy agents safely, and it's something that you really cannot ignore or put off for very long because they're coming, Your C-suite's going to be using them, your developers are going to be using them, and your board's going to be asking you to deploy them internally, right? So, so get ready for the storm, but realize that there are very good solutions available right now.
Yeah. Well,
Here, here.
we have been talking to a growing number of people about this issue on the podcast, and definitely you've stood out today with like a very thoughtful approach to how to tackle it. So thanks
Yeah.
a lot, Jeff. This was
Well,
a
thank
great
you,
chat.
Alex. Thank you, Tony.
Thank